Shalom, and welcome to another session in the series of the people of Israel coming home. Today we will study the book of Joshua, chapter 10. Chapter 10 actually is a quite long chapter. We're talking about 43 verses, and it's a very important chapter in the book of Joshua, in the history of the people of Israel, in the story of the people of Israel coming home. For several reasons. First of all, till now, we spoke about the people of Israel in battle against a city, Jericho, the Ai. Here, we're not talking about only about one city. We have a coalition of cities. But that's only one point. In this chapter, we have two very, very specific, interesting topics. First of all, this is the first chapter, or the first time in the entire book, that the city of Jerusalem is mentioned. We're talking about the first verse of chapter 10, Perek Yud Pasuk Aleph, Vayihi Kishmoa Adoni Tzedek Melech Yerushalayim. The king of Jerusalem has heard Ki Lachad Yehoshua et Ai, that Joshua has conquered the Ai. He also heard, of course, Kasher Asali Richo, Ken Asala Ayu Lemalka, as Joshua did to Jericho and its king, so too he did to the Ai and its king. But he also heard Ki Hishlimu Yoshvei Giv'on et Yisrael Ayu B'kirbam. He also heard that the people of Giv'on have made peace with Israel. And the Tanakh continues, Vayir'u me'od, they were very frightening, they were fearing, greatly feared. Why? Ki ir gedola Giv'on ki achat arei hamamlacha. Because Giv'on was a great city, like one of the royal cities. So, not only is it a great city, and not only is it a royal city, v'chihi gdola min ha'ai v'chol anasheha giburim. It's bigger than the Ai that Israel managed to overcome. And also the people of this city, Giv'on, are very, very strong. Now we should remember that the city of Giv'on is, throughout the next few books even, I would say, plays a very important role. Giv'on was one of the locations of the tabernacle. We know the tabernacle, after it arrived in Israel, its first stop for several hundred years, for almost 370 years, it was in Shiloh. But after the ark was taken to the war against the Philistines, in the book of Judges, the ark went then on to Beit Shemesh and to Kiryat Ye'arim, which was one of the cities of Giv'on. But the tabernacle, without the ark, the tabernacle itself, the place where the people would worship God on the altar, was in a different place. At first it was in the city of the priests, the Kohanim, in Nov, and then it was located in Giv'on. And we know that in Giv'on, God approached Solomon, where Solomon gets the first prophecy in the dream, and God asks him, what do you prefer? Do you prefer wealth, or do you prefer health, or do you prefer wisdom? And Solomon approves and agrees that he wants wisdom, which is more than everything, and God gives him the wisdom, and then he goes ahead and builds the temple. So we would say the beginning of the building of the temple also takes part in Giv'on. So we see that Giv'on plays a very special role, and Jerusalem, of course. But one other thing that happens in this chapter of chapter 10 of Joshua, the first time in the history, the only time in history, where God listens to the word of man. As it says in verse 14, There was no day like this before. Lo haya bayom kayomahu lefanav ve'acharav, and after it. When the Hashem listened, heeded the voice of man. Lishmoa Adonai bekol ish. So we have in this chapter, God listening to the word of man, and we will see what happens, of course. We all know the famous story of Shemesh begiv'on dom ve'yareach be'emek ayalon. The sun stands over Giv'on, and the moon in the valley of Ayalon. So in this chapter, we finally, for the first time, we meet Jerusalem, and the king of Jerusalem, his name is Adoni Tzedek, meaning the leader of righteous. By the way, we've heard also already about Malki Tzedek, the king of Shalem, and that takes place in the book of Genesis, where Abraham meets Malki Tzedek, the king of righteousness, who was the king of Shalem, but that was only a nickname of Jerusalem. The first time the city of Jerusalem is mentioned in its full name is in our chapter. So what happens here in this chapter is very exciting. The king of Jerusalem hears that Joshua signed a covenant with the people of Giv'on. The covenant was very simple, that he would not attack them. He promised them. The people of Israel swore to them, as we saw in our last verse, in our last lesson. The people of Israel sweared they will not attack the Giv'onites. But they didn't promise to protect them. The people of Israel, when the Giv'onites in our chapter approach the people of Israel and say, "Vayishlechu anshe Giv'on Yoshua," the men of Giv'on sent a word to Joshua, "Please help us, because the kings of Jerusalem, together with a coalition of kings, the king of Hebron, and the king of Yarmut, and the king of Lachish, and the king of Dvir, 5 kings, want to attack us. Please come and help us." Joshua could have said, "Listen, I'm busy. Sorry." But Joshua knows that it's not only the question of what he owes the people of Giv'on. Joshua remembers capturing the land of Israel is conquering the land of God. Conquering the land of God in the name of God for the behavior in the footsteps of God. This has to be in a way that sanctifies the name of God. And if we signed a treaty, if we signed a covenant, and the people of Israel swore to the Giv'onites that they will not attack them, it includes protecting them. And Joshua goes ahead and protects the people of Giv'on. Not only does he go ahead and protect them, as a matter of fact, he totally determines his whole life and his whole army to protect the Giv'onites. They come up all the way from the east, from the Gilgal, which is all the way near Jericho, near the Dead Sea, near the Jordan River, which they had passed. And they climb those very steep mountains all the way to Giv'on, which is right near Jerusalem. And he did that all night, in one night. His whole army climbs to Giv'on to protect the people of Giv'on. By doing this, he surprises the kings of Jerusalem. As the verse says, "Vayavo aleihem Yehoshua pitom." Joshua comes to them suddenly, in surprise. Kol halayla ala min hagilgal. Because all night he climbs from the Gilgal. And what does he do? Vayehumeim Adonai lifnei Yisrael. Vayakem makah gedola begiv'on. Vayirdefem derech ma'aleh bet Charon. Vayakem ad azekah ve'ad makida. Hashem helps him confuse these nations before the people of Israel, and powerfully blows at Giv'on. But this was not enough. Joshua requests one more request. Please, Shemesh begivon dom. The sun at that time was straight above Givon. We're talking about the noon. It was noontime. The moon had not yet set. But Joshua needed the time. Why did he need the time? He already managed to overcome these kings. Why did he need the time? And this is a very important aspect of victory in war. It is not enough to manage to take over the area. It is not enough that those kings, or this entire coalition, all their cities were ruled by Joshua. This was not enough. Because even if they surrendered, the people of Israel are coming to Israel to stay here. They're coming to sanctify God's name, we said in 1, and that was the fact that they had to keep their promise. And beyond keeping their promise, protect the Givonites. But this was not enough. They had to establish a Jewish land in Israel. They had to establish, and it was not enough to take over the area. They had to defeat and create a total victory. And this, Joshua needed a few more hours. Otherwise, these kings would run back to cities that are surrounded by walls, and the whole thing would have to begin again. Joshua understood. He understood that he had to totally defeat them. Not because he was bloodthirsty, but vice versa. He knew that if the people of Israel did not manage to totally take over and manage to totally settle in these cities, it would not be enough. And the people of Israel wanted to take over the land of Israel in the word of God. And the people of Israel had to live here in peace. In order for this to happen, Joshua had to be sure that that this battle was totally defeated, that the war was a total victory, so that all the kings in the land recognized the fact that after Joshua conquered Jericho and the Ai, he had now taken over the whole southern district, the whole southern region of the land. And in order to do this, he needed that few more hours of light, and God gave it to him, because God understood that Joshua made the effort. And this is a very important message. Living in Eretz Israel, coming and living in Israel. It's not enough to pray to God, please help me. We have to understand that it demands our effort. It demands a struggle. But if man struggles in the intention of going in the Word of God and establishing a Jewish state for the sake of sanctifying God's name, and even though it caused an extra struggle and an extra effort, if you're doing it in that way, you can even come to a day where God will listen to the word of man. Because Joshua had put the effort, had an intention of concluding God's mission, this was to promise that here they were to establish an eternal Jewish state, sanctifying the name of God. We do in our days have returned back to the land of Israel. And we have to remember that though we should pray to God, it's a struggle. It's a daily struggle. And if we do it in the intention of sanctifying God's name, God will be on our side. And we will succeed in bringing about this goal that God has appointed the people of Israel to take upon themselves. And once again, the people of Israel in their homeland will be able to be a light to the nations and call upon God's name from his chosen city, Jerusalem. Shalom.